Enmei Juku Kanangyo Kanze Anamu Butsu Yo Butsu Uen Yo Butsu Uen Bobo Soen Jo Raku Gajo Shonen Kanze An Bonen Kanze An Nennen Jushin Ki Nennen Furishin Kanze Anamu Butsu Yo Butsu Uen Yo Butsu Uen Bobo Soen Jo Raku Gajo Chonen Kanze An Bonen Kanze An Nennen Jushin Ki Nennen Furishin Kanze An Namu Butsu Yo Butsu Uen Yo Butsu Uen Bobo Soen Jo Raku Gajo Chonen Kanze An Bonen Kanze An Nennen Jushin Ki Nennen Furishin Absorbing world sounds awakens a Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recall this, in the dark recall this. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Absorbing world sounds awakens a Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recall this, in the dark recall this. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Absorbing world sounds awakens a Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recall this, in the dark recall this. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Infinite realms of light and dark convey the Buddha mind. All that is and we ourselves come forth in perfect harmony. We offer this sincere and devoted practice for the many beings of the 6 worlds, and dedicated in grateful thanks to the strength and sound practice of the Great Heartland Sangha and its teachers. May our virtuous actions be clear from all interferences, and may our vows be fully realized. We especially dedicate these merits to Thich Nhat Hanh Daiosho, Tim Ellis, Barb at the time of her passing, Donna. We also dedicate these merits to those whose names we hold in the silence of our hearts, as well as those we now voice aloud. May we live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma, and may we realize the Buddha way together. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, Maha Prajna Paramita. Prepare for Zazen. recite the Sangha Covenant. We, the Daishin Kokuji Sangha, with respect for the worth and dignity of each person, with wonder at the wisdom and compassion we seek to cultivate by practice, and with deep gratitude for the teachers of this lineage and our connection to one another, covenant to support each other by upholding the precepts of doing no harm, practicing good, and actualizing good for others. Prepare for Teisho. Gata on opening the sutra. The Dharma incomparably profound and infinitely subtle is rarely encountered even in millions of ages. Now we see it, hear it, receive and maintain it. May we completely realize the Tathagata's true meaning.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. A lot is going on. I don't know if you can feel it in the air, but the dragons are starting to circle around, and as we're getting closer to this grand opening, even today, but we got our new tanka, our white Tara tanka, and this came from Nepal, and it was made specifically for our temple. And as you know, white Tara is sort of our patron Buddha, I guess you could say, fully endowed. And just as we unfurled her and put her up, my phone starts ringing, and it's Ed Brown. Now, Ed Brown is an old friend of ours from San Francisco Zen Center, and he wrote the Tassajara bread book back in the 70s. And it was the breakthrough, like, home, make bread at home book. And it sold millions and millions of copies. Everyone had the Tassajara bread book back in the day. And he helped to found the Greens restaurant, and he was a very significant person in the founding of the San Francisco Zen Center. And he was at my first transmission ceremony, and we've had a hard time getting a hold of him. But lo and behold, he called, and so he's back in the fold, and he's getting an invitation, and he says he can come, which is really lovely. I'm grateful for that. So tonight, I would like to talk about Gelek Rinpoche, because it is his 5th year commemoration of his death, and that happened last night, 5 years ago. And Tara is here because of him. And so much of our way that we do practice here is because of Gelek Rinpoche. And I just thought I'd talk a little bit about his life and my encounters with him. You know, I was asked to do some writing about him when he died, and I just couldn't say anything. I was just so filled with grief and kind of sense of loss. But I think after 5 years, I feel more settled. And it's really interesting because it's like the two people that have shaped our Sanghas the most, it's like Rinsen and Gelek Rinpoche. And I really wanted Rinsen to be here with me tonight so that we could do this together. But he's not here, and Rinpoche's not here, and yet they are here. So they're actually here in amazingly, it doesn't matter that this building is brand new. Their spirit is everywhere in this building. And because of that, we are continually being met and taught. This is such a rare thing to encounter the Dharma, to encounter this path of total freedom and liberation. And I think it's hard to see it while we're in it. But after Rinpoche left, I didn't feel a sense of being able to like go on with Demo Rinpoche, because he wasn't the same. And I know that it's supposed to be the Dharma is the Dharma is the Dharma, whoever speaks it. But I felt strongly that Rinpoche wanted me to take what he had taught and give it shape here. So we've done that. And I have to say, I'll just tell some stories about him. First of all, he was born in 1939 in Tibet. His father was the uncle of the 13th Dalai Lama. So Potala Palace is here, and his family's palace is next door. Bob Thurman says, imagine like, the Roosevelts or something of Tibet. And that was Gelek Rinpoche's family. His father was a psychic and an oracle. And apparently he would mediate between the spirit world and the human world. And there would be people lining up to try and get him to help them make peace with whatever was kind of haunting them. So pretty much Gelek Rinpoche grew up with what would you say, everybody knocking at his door. He met so many people, and he was surrounded by, I think, incredible wealth, actually, and power. He says that he was born into the 14th century and was dropped into the 20th century when they left. Well, he was exiled, really, when the Chinese invaded in 1959. He was only 20 years old, and prior to that, he had been tapped as an incarnation of an abbot of a monastery. And this is sort of like a Galupa monastery, so this would be like the Yale or the Harvard of Tibet. And at 20 years old, he got like the highest degree of, like a PhD, basically. And the reason why he could do that was he had a memory, like one of those photographic memories. Like he could look at a page and memorize it. So he'd memorize like books and books and books. And apparently he was so good at it, he could even recite them in his sleep. His teachers were kind of like, what the heck is going on here? So we're going to make him, his study was on the 3rd floor. They made him stand in the windowsill of the study and do his recitations so that he wouldn't fall asleep. And apparently, I guess he figured out how he could, he leaned against the sill so he wouldn't fall. Unfortunately, they decided after a while, maybe that wasn't such a good idea to have him hanging out of the windowsill. Oh, gosh, I remember the first teaching I went to with him. Actually, it was kind of looked like this, actually. And I'm sitting up there in the front row, and I'm all ready, right? And he looks at me in front of like 250 people. Where's your book? You need your book. And I felt like saying, Rinpoche, I'm a Zen person. We don't carry books around. But really what he was saying to me was, I need to fill you with the knowledge that I have so that you can bring it to your Sangha. And he actually did that. I've told this story so many times, but I will never forget it, and I wish I could express directly the experience that I had. The big, thick book, 800, 1,000 pages, I don't know what, of teaching in Tibetan for 10 days. I followed every single page he was on. And not only that, I could literally feel him, my whole chest just being ripped open. And all of like a deck of cards just went bloop, 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 bloop. And it was like all of these holes that I had had in my training. he completely filled them up. And I remember I used to give him these pots. You know that potter that I like from Massachusetts? You know, I have actually one of her bowls is up here. I would give him these pots after a teaching. And whenever he would open one up, he'd look at me and he'd smile. And he'd take a piece of candy and he'd drop it into the pot. And of course, this was his teaching, right? Into that empty vessel, we're putting some really sweet, juicy Dharma. So I just was doing some reading about him, and something struck me that I hadn't really paid that much. I mean, I'd sort of paid attention to, but it really hit me this time. That he said for the White Tara teaching that he really wanted women to be doing the teaching, to be passing down this woman's line. And I am so grateful, beyond grateful, that we are able to do that here. And soon we'll be doing a lot more of that on a weekly basis. Funny story about him, he loved sweets. And apparently, when he was a kid, he would go to sleep with a sucker or something in his mouth. And then he'd wake up in the morning and his hair would be all stuck to the pillow. You know, he had a wonderful sense of humor like that and real sparkle in his eye, but he had such a gravitas to him. And I remember one time I was at a teaching and I was like, okay, I'm going to test this guy. And so when he was done, I sort of sat a little bit away from him and I used all of my ki and all of my power, right, to see, okay, can I get in there? And I have a substantial amount of ki that I can use. And I swear to God, he would look over at me and he would just twinkle his eye at me. And there was no way I was getting in or anywhere near him. He had that kind of power. And at the same time, he completely let me in. All the way, completely opened my heart and completely opened his heart to me. You know, when he asked me to come to his teachings, and I arrived, there was me and a husband and wife couple, and one of his senior students said to me, I can't believe he let you in here. He never lets anybody in that's on whatever, a teacher or somebody transmitted or whatever. But somehow, he let me stay. Then the other really significant moment is when we were at the Namgyal Monastery in Ithaca. I had driven to go to a teaching, and it was homecoming week. I've told this story before, but I guess I'll tell it again. It was homecoming week, and of course there was no room in the inn. There was no hotels were open in Ithaca. Nothing. So I drove around, and I finally went to the monastery, and I knocked on the door, and I said, you know, I'm here for Rinpoche's teaching in the morning. There's no place to stay, and I'd like to stay here at the monastery. And the monk said, oh, no, you couldn't possibly stay here. You're a woman. So I was like, oh, gosh. So I literally parked my car in the driveway of the monastery And I slept in my car. And then I got up in the morning and went to like Starbucks or something and washed my face in the bathroom or whatever. You know, of course it was really early and all the people that had been like up partying all night were still kind of like hanging on for dear life, you know, with their coffee. I was thinking of, I don't know, I felt a little bit like Madonna at that moment. Desperately Seeking Susan or whatever it is, that movie she did. So I got to the teaching, and he asked me to come up on the altar with him. And I didn't have my robes on. I don't even think I had my rock suit with me. So, you know, up I go. And of course, he taught for hours, right? And I had to sit in, like, whatever, half lotus or lotus for hours. And it was really hard. And there was this monk beside me that obviously had been, like, you know, just come from India and had been sitting for, like, days and days and days. And he was just, like, totally straight the whole time. And I'm like, squirming around. I'm like, oh, this is not a good look. But I couldn't help it. It was a long time. There was no kinhin, right? So it was a great teaching. It was actually on the 3 principles of the path. And I got off the dais after he was done, and all of these women gathered around me, and they said, oh my God, we have never seen a woman up on that dais. Now remember, this is the seat of the Dalai Lama in America. And the reason why it's at Cornell is because there was some program going on with the CIA and a bunch of things where they brought over all these high-level Rinpoches to train them. And I think they must have gotten some land, or I don't know how it all worked. But anyway, so the seat of the that's why the seat of the Dalai Lama is in Ithaca. But that's who Rinpoche was. And that's, yeah, it feels like a huge kind of responsibility and this huge gift. And I have to say, too, told this story, too, about Bob Thurman, you know? Does everybody know who Bob Thurman is? You know who Uma Thurman is, the actress? Yeah. Well, Bob Thurman is her father. And he was one of the first Western monks to study with the Dalai Lama. And when he was there, Rinpoche was there. And at first they started out as students together. But then sometime in the 70s, Rinpoche began to give him Vajrayana teachings. So they switched. They weren't just peers. Now Rinpoche was his student. And when I saw Bob Thurman, again, this was like one of those, like, the universe opens up at Hampshire College. And it was like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, okay, what is going on here? Something is totally different about this guy. And all I knew was he had a really cool eye patch and he was kind of handsome, but there was a lot more going on there. So, of course, Rinpoche was there in him at that time. So I could feel it, but I don't know, Bob Thurman was like just going crazy with Sanskrit at that time. And it even brought Rinpoche to Amherst at the time. I don't want to ramble too much, but I want to give you as much as I can a flavor of sort of that really intimate feeling, and that, like, at the same time he just made me feel so warm and loved and accepted. at the same time that he just would just keep going in there and keep going in there and keep going in there. And especially, he would say, I'm giving you the quality of your heart. I'm giving you the quality of your mind. Don't settle. And especially around the warm-heartedness and working with anger and working with hatred and working with delusion and working with craving. He was really just so relentless about that. And I feel like I could never be the teacher that he was. But I want to try just to give even like a small little fingernail of what he gave me. So, today it's very auspicious that our Tara Tanka came from Nepal. I think she looks quite beautiful up there, right? Yeah, like she was made for us. And then we have this picture of Rinpoche up on the altar. And that Buddha in the back, we are trying, I'm working with Ujin right now up in Ann Arbor, and we're going to try to get a Buddha that looks something like that for our altar. We thought we had one, but the the thumbs were a little separated. So we have to, looks like they're going to perhaps make us one. But are there any questions you'd like to ask me about Rinpoche or about how this teaching works inside of our Zen tradition? I mean, he's the reason why we don't call this temple the Buddhist Temple, the Zen Buddhist Temple of Toledo. It is hidden because there's so much of his mind training and his way of delivering the Dharma that is present. All of the home liturgy, everything you read there is pretty much him.
If you were a Zen student at the time, what drew you to Rinpoche to make the decision to go and study?
Oh, well, you know what? I actually would like to say that I was a Tibetan Buddhist student first because I was drawn to Bob Thurman, and I took his class at Amherst College. And like right out of the gate, he was like, Avalokiteshvara, blah, 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 all in Sanskrit. And I was just like, oh my God, I am too dumb for this. I can't understand a word he's saying. And I said, I don't, this is Amherst. I was at UMass, I just wasn't the same caliber at all. I thought, this is not for me, And then shortly after that, I met my first Zen teacher. And the only reason why I studied with him was because I didn't have to read anything. All I had to do was just stare at the wall. And I figured I could manage that. And actually I'll never forget the first day I went to an introduction with him. I put on my graduation dress from high school, this white dress, because I just felt like I was really, something was happening here. And I was also carrying this sort of pickle jar or peanut butter jar of coffee with a lid on it, because everybody did that back in the days. And he had us meditating, so I put my jar of peanut butter down by my knees. And we sat for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then we did kinhin. As we're walking around, right, he pulled me out of the line, and he said, we don't have peanut butter jars next to our knees when we're sitting zazen. But I know that sounds so trite, but oh my God, that same sort of rip my heart out feeling was there. It was like I had never had somebody say something like kind of in your face, like correction, without any psychic fist in my face. It was just this pure purity. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? I've been looking for that my whole life. What is that purity? It's exactly, please. You know? So that is why I started studying Zen first. And then it took me, gosh, I don't know, 30 years to circle back. And I was very lucky because, as I said, he let me in. And I should actually talk about how I met him. I met him at Garrison. Well, another time. But anyway, I asked him a Dharma question. We were in a small group together, and he looked at me. He said, "What?" And I asked him again. I was like right in his face, right in his ear. And he looked at me and said, "You come to my teaching." And that was it. It's like just that capacity to cut through all of the negativity. That's what my teachers showed me was possible. I mean, to really have the possibility to experience this pure heart. You know, in the light we call this, in the dark. Any other questions?
So I am also a Tibetan student in the Zen center. So I find when you talk about your experience, I find it really touching for me, for my own experience. And my teacher is back home in China. I'm actually from China. And I go to school in the University of Toledo. And I know that it's very important. Tibetan tradition and Zen tradition to be able to have your teacher really, really close to you, not just close mentally, but also physically. So I have been struggling a little bit to stay away from home, from families and the community and my teachers in general. So I would just want to see what's your opinion about that. Have you always had the chance to stay close with your teacher and Rinpoche, or when you're not, how do you deal with that and all that?
Thank you. Yes, I can really appreciate what you're saying. Well, I mean, part of it is that, I've been married to my teacher for 25 years. And then before that, we were together for I don't know, since the Bronze Age or whatever. So I do some guru devotion practices. And I also just try to listen and to ask questions like, help me, what should I do now? And I usually get an answer. The whole point of this is the teacher is supposed to be awakening our own inner guru, our own inner teacher. That's the whole, we are all Buddhas. So they just kind of speed up the process because they give us a like, oh, you've been touched. Okay, I can resonate with your energetic field because there's been some kind of a mind-to-mind, body-to-body energy transmission. And that's kind of unspeakable, actually. And actually, just to say it, that's why being with a teacher is so important, because that energetic mind-to-mind transmission, that's what keeps the Dharma alive. That's what makes it a living tradition. You lose that unspeakable, energetic mind-to-mind transmission, you don't really have the full Dharma. So, and there is only one teacher, right? And the teacher is here. So. Anything else?
This is more a comment than a question. From the people out there in Zoom land. I'm just saying this is more of a comment than a question, but I can just remember being really surprised and happy when I first walked into the probably then Zen center, but saw a tanka over the altar, which I didn't expect. And one of the things that I really love about our Sangha is that it's this great stew of traditions that actually have come together. You know, Soto and Rinzai and the Tibetan. And I don't know, I just feel like that really enriches our teachings and our Sangha and what's available to all of us. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, me too. We're extremely lucky. Extremely lucky. All right. Oh, one more. Yeah.
Probably a really quick question, actually. I was just wondering how much time you actually spent with Rinpoche.
Well, I met him in 2010 or 11, and he died in 2017. So 6 or 7 years, depending. And I pretty much went to every single teaching he gave, and I would sort of travel where I was like a Dharma groupie. If he was somewhere, I was there. So actually, it was interesting. I had enough of like a pretty full cycle of teaching. So I got most of the main teachings, which is amazing.
You and Rinson are putting this, you're writing a book, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's not a secret, is it? Oh.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Oops. No. Okay. So it's of his teachings, or it's of Rinpoche's teachings in part, right?
Well, it's kind of like the mush that we have. You know, we're talking about the different strains and all that stuff and how it all fits together. Yeah. So we have to keep moving on that. We like to talk a lot more than we like to write. Right, well, thank you so much for listening and for being here tonight and for honoring Rinpoche on his 5th anniversary of his death. And, he would always say, what really counts is your spiritual development. And that is that you take all of the teachings all of your experience, all of, everything you're experiencing in Zazen, everything you're experiencing in liturgy, everything you're experiencing in the workshops and being in community and going into Dokusan, and really use that to totally transform your heart so that we all just get to experience our birthright as being just loving, kind, wonderful people. Right? We all get to experience our birthright as Buddhists. Not only loving and kind, but powerful, able to transform ourselves and our world. And I think we're certainly doing that here. Spiritual development. He would say, this is, your spiritual development is the most important thing. That's your shield. He would always say, I'm giving you the quality of your mind. Quality of your mind. Taking you from samsaric perception to extraordinary perception, to Buddhist perception. So, maybe so.
Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Thank you for coming, everyone. Are there any announcements? I know there's the Zazenkai. Zazenkai is this Saturday from 9 to noon. It'll be mostly Zazen, and I believe people can tune in on Zoom for the Dharma talk or the Mondo, right? And there's information on email and Facebook. So please restore the Zendo.